Okay, so welcome and thank you for joining me at Slaying the Boggart. This is an exercise where we're going to do a bit of a storybook to
Yeah.
help you slay the Boggart. So that's why we have paper and markers that you're going to need on hand. Um, we've done a little bit of an introduction, but I kind of would like I think we got you as a Ravenclaw, but do you have a favorite heroine or hero character? More so from the Harry Potter series, but it can be outside of there as well.
Um, I love Hermione. Who do
What's
you love? I got Torin here too.
oh
So,
great.
who's your favorite?
The twins.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
yeah, yeah. The twins are like people underrate them. They're so smart and clever, and they so creative and joyous. I love their energy. And Hermione is incredibly smart, and she just embraces everything about this new world, coming from a Muggle world into a magical world and taking that on in a huge way. So yes, and you are going to need those characters kind of in the back of your minds for part of this exercise.
There's a notebook there.
So a little bit about me. I have a coaching practice called 9 3/4 Coaching, and I am a Potterhead coach. All my coaching is based around the Harry Potter series. I used Harry Potter terminology to support my clients. Primary target market is Gen Z young ladies, but I also know that I resonate with a lot of other people, including very strong Potterheads. I'm okay with that. Um, I've been a member of Girl Guides of Canada for 30 years, and that's why I work with young ladies and I love to travel and been all over the place. So that's just a little bit. And so this presentation is just a wee little bit of what I do in my bigger practice. We're going to start off by having you on a piece of paper write down some of the emotions that you know of that you have experienced. We have a tendency when we're talking to people or being introduced to people, they'll ask us, "How are you doing?" And we'll say, "Good, bad, or fine." But good, bad, and fine define nothing. It's really hard to get connected to what you're feeling if that's how you're defining it. So, what are some of the emotions that do come up for you?
I have a lot of love and joy.
Yeah,
Lots of days I have. Sorry, are we interacting back and forth, or
yes,
what are we doing?
absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
sorry.
I'm all
Um,
good for this. Please do.
Panic, anxiety, um, hope. Yeah, those are kind of where I go. I'm
Yeah.
getting a funny look, so I think he's got other ones written down on his page.
Turin, what do you have?
Annoyed, pissed off, concerned. I got happy there. I got sad. I don't know. I'm just writing down like the things that come to mind from like a third grade level.
No, that's perfectly fine. The fact that you actually can identify something other than good, bad, or fine is important because we can't truly understand happiness and joy unless we have an understanding of what sadness or grief or resignation or anger is, right? And we need to feel like, how does that feel in my body? What happens when I'm experiencing those emotions? And when we identify the emotions, then we can take steps to, am I going to stay in this emotion? Am I choosing to stay here? If I'm not choosing to stay here, what can I do otherwise? And so, a lot of times, what comes up with people that I work with is that stress is a big factor that comes into their life. And so, stress is a state of mental or emotional strain resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances, but I think of it more as an emotional response due to fear. And so, what happens in our brains take in data from our sensories, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our hands. It takes the data in and it processes it. And then it goes, okay, this is this is happiness, this is joy, this is fear. And when we get fear, it generates stress in our bodies. And so fear comes in two parts, two main parts. There is perceived fear and real fear. And real fear, do you think of what an example of real fear might be?
Um, my kids like extreme sports and I do not.
Mhm,
So to
mhm.
me, the fear is completely rational that I am going to break something. They think I'm not rational. So,
Hey, we,
um,
we totally broke two of our friends in the last 3 weeks. So, like, your fear is rational. We just don't
yeah,
experience it.
yeah. So, so yes, they're avid outdoor sports people. I'm the book person. So yeah, so there's that. There is a danger that's out there. So when I try to keep up, I do have a perceived danger or threat, adrenaline crashing while I try to, yeah, play with my own kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So real fear is when our physical bodies, our physical form is at risk of injury or worse. And that's normal and that's rational. And it's how our brain, or that caveman sort of brain is. We react to the fear comes in and we react, we go from there. Now, perceived fear is more like when we're going in to write an exam and we get all stressed out. Audrey, you mentioned in our earlier conversation, walking into a conference room full of people, that becomes into a perceived danger area. You're physically not at risk, um, you know, for the most part, right?
Yep.
We're just in an uncomfortable space. And our brains perceive it the same as if we were going to be physically at risk. Now, there is a third kind called phobia. That's irrational fears, and that's things like arachnophobia, fear of heights, fear of um, mother-in-laws. I've heard fear of long words. There's all sorts of different ones. And as we enter into our vaccination stage, there's going to be people who are going to have problems with needles, right?
Mhm.
Those are irrational fears. Now, I don't work with irrational fears. I do recommend that if you have one and you want to work with it, certainly seek out some professionals. There's counselors and cognitive behavioral people who are really fabulous at dealing with that, but I don't do it. Now, on your piece of paper, I want you to write down 3 things that you know happen to you when you're experiencing fear. So if you're struggling with this, you can't think of something, think about what happens when you walk into that conference room, when you walk into an exam. What happens to your body? What are some of the physical responses?
So for me, my heart will start to pound. Um, I can almost I don't sometimes I physically shake, but sometimes it's almost like I feel like I'm shaking even though I'm not physically shaking. I just kind of feel like I have the shakes. Um, and a sense of nausea. If the fear is prolonged or the stressor is prolonged, it triggers really bad anxiety headaches for me.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I get a lot of like anxiety, just like the general sort of that feeling of stress and anxiety. I get um adrenaline a lot, just kind of to just sort of rationalize. And I have ADHD, so a lot of the time I will start noticing my ADHD symptoms, the ones that are more behavioral and stuff like that. I'll start noticing those more often if I'm scared.
Yeah, absolutely. So our fight, flight, and freeze reflexes kick in, the 3 Fs. So we might want to fight it, run from it, or if we freeze. We can physically freeze, or our brains can just physically freeze, so we can't access their, mental capacities. We know there's information there, but we just can't get to them. That heart rate, and yet like the heart beats so hard and fast, it's like it's going to jump out of your chest, and your breathing changes. You start breathing short, shallow breaths, and that's where we start hyperventilating. And this becomes a problem because in our lungs we have these filaments that collect oxygen, but most of those filaments are at the bottom of our lungs. And so if we're not breathing deep down, we're not getting the oxygen to our brain. When we're not getting oxygen to our brain, we're also not getting oxygen to the rest of our bodies. And what that causes is our stomachs will get upset. And I learned this from when I had pneumonia. I wasn't getting enough oxygen to my body, and I would get nauseous, and that was a symptom of pneumonia. You will start to shake. You can physically shake, or feel like you're shaking inside. There's also, you can have like voluntary shaking or involuntary. Now, voluntary shaking, I'm one of these people who do voluntary shaking. If I'm sitting down, I'll put the pad of my foot on the floor and I'll bounce my knee up and down. And it's a way for me to get that adrenal energy outside of me. And the adrenal energy feels itchy sometimes from the inside. You might want to feel like you need to move your arms and legs, or like there's bubbles, like balls bouncing around inside. And then we get racing thoughts. And those racing thoughts, unfortunately, go to our worst case scenario. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, it would, when you said the itchy part, I hadn't keyed in on that before, but I certainly have experienced that before. So
Yeah, it feels really weird, but like itchy from the inside.
it's
Like,
skin crawling.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a skin crawling kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes us feel uncomfortable. And so those are the things we experience when we're having fear. And if we can identify it, we can go, oh, that's fear. What do I want to do with it? And so one of the ways I like to deal with it is think of it as a Boggart. So from the Harry Potter series, the Boggart shows up in the Prisoner of Azkaban book or movie. And it's when Professor Lupin has his class come together, they're standing in front of this really large wardrobe. And inside the wardrobe, he has a Boggart. And he explains that a Boggart is the physical form of our worst fears. So Neville comes forward, and when Neville's Boggart comes out of the wardrobe, it is Professor Snape, because he fears everything about Professor Snape in all forms. He fears his physical presence, what he's going to say, what he's going to do to him. When it comes to Ron's turn, it's a spider, but Ron doesn't get an itsy bitsy tiny little spider that comes up. It's the giant form, right? And it's scary. It's like scary not just for Ron, but it's scary for the rest of the class. And in that moment, like Harry doesn't get his opportunity, and he has to later go to Professor Lupin, and he's having a conversation. He says, well, I thought it was Voldemort initially, but the more I think about it, I think that it's the Dementors, and those were those creatures that suck all joy and happiness from us. And Lupin very wisely turns to him and he says, Harry, it's fear in and of itself that you fear most. And I thought, wow, that's really profound. And so I was like, how do we get control of that, right? That whole sense of fear. And so when I thought of my fear in its physical form, it showed up as this Viking. This is just an image, but my Viking is 7 feet tall and he's just really scary. And I've given him the whole persona. I've given him an identity and everything else. So how do we give your fears an identity that'll help you? What I want you to do is on your paper, write down some of the things, the fears that are causing you the most amount of stress. So think of a situation that gives you the most amount of discomfort, and what are the thoughts that come up? Some people think of fear of success, fear of failure, fear of heights, fear that gets into phobias, but fear of looking good or looking bad, not looking good enough, not fitting in. Those are all quite rational fears that people have, as adults, we tend to find them a lot more difficult to uncover because we put up barriers around it to protect it so we don't have to deal with it. When teenagers actually have better access to what those fears are. And they're able, yeah, I know, like I've experienced that, I know what that is. When I tried to do this exercise the first time, it actually took me 3 days. And the reason why is because my fear is of looking like a loser. And if I actually uncovered my Boggart, then I would like bring forward the fact that I was looking like a loser. So it continuously kept buried from me. So once you have some of those fears down, what is the predominant message that shows up for you? And I don't want you to tell me because it's really personal. Each person is very personal and, and they get connected to that Boggart. And then I want you to imagine what would be the physical representation of what that Boggart might be. Now, I have a friend who is the youngest of 4 boys, and his 3 older brothers are very smart, they're very athletic. So when he started going to school, his teachers always were comparing him to his older brothers. And so his physical representation of his Boggart became this huge measuring tape that had all of his brothers' names on it, but not his. So your Boggart could be like mine, that's a physical person creation that I did, or something that is less personal, like an inanimate object. And I want you to draw out the representation of your Boggart. Now, I am horrible at drawing. I have no artistic talents whatsoever. If you're like me, I want you to draw a stick figure instead, and then write the words that represent your Boggart all the way around your Boggart. What do they look like? What are they wearing? What is their weapon that maybe they're using against you? Draw out those physical elements. If you're using the stick figure, the neat thing about this is you can go back to the internet and find some clip art or screenshots of something that better represents your image of what you're trying to create. And we're just going to do a rough draft because this is something you can expand on and do over and over again. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be a person, it can be an item, like a totem, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Anything that you think would give that fear that you have a physical form. I gave mine a gender just because that was important to me, but it could be genderless, doesn't matter, has no representation. Some people think of it as goo. I don't know how do you draw goo, but that's what for some people goo is a good example of their form. Um, I've had like just boxes because what's inside a box can be scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you're working on that, I want you to think about a name that you might give your Boggart. And so the name is really important. It needs to have a name that is unique to it. And when you're thinking about a name, I don't want you to use a name of somebody who is a bully in your life, or somebody who, like past or present, or somebody that's a family member. It should be somebody who's completely unique and different and outside of that space. Hi, Michelle. How are you doing? You're, you're just joining us in now. Sorry, I've got you mute. You're on mute right now.
There we go. Hi, thanks.
We're kind of a little bit in right now, and that's okay. We're
Okay.
drawing a physical representation of our fear.
Okay.
So if you can work and figure out, identify what your greatest fear is, and then give it a physical form, and we're drawing that out. So you're a little bit behind the ball, but that's okay. We'll give you some,
Okay.
yeah. And it's important that we name it. So my Boggart's name is Grundle. Given him the name Grundle because to me it sounded Norwegian, and he's that Viking that's 7 feet tall and it's scary. But also Grundle seemed to have a guttural sound in my throat. And when I say Grundle, it sounds yicky. I'll also explain that, but it sounds really yicky and uncomfortable. And so that's the name I gave my Boggart. And so you want to have something that is going to represent them, but not a bully that you've had in the past or present, and not a family member. One of the reasons that is if we do that, we actually project this information from your Boggart onto that person, and we give that person more power than they're really entitled to. And we don't want to project that information onto that person. Make sense? Perfect. Torrin and Audrey, how is that going for you?
Yeah, sorry, we muted for a second to just chat because I needed a name, and I was trying to I may change it later, but I was staying in the Harry Potter theme. My totem in this case, I think this is going to sound really morbid, is a tombstone. And not because I have a fear of death, but there's some issues surrounding all of that. And rather than put it all into a person, place kind of idea, the tombstone being alone is really what dives deep into where my space is. Because yes, I've done a lot of work over the last 5-7 years. And I know where my demons are, where my Boggart is very, very profoundly. But I need to name him. So in the Harry Potter theme, I was trying to think of the name of the
Peveril brothers.
Paveril brothers, because I don't want to name it a Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
I want to, because that just sounds even more morbid. So the Ignatius or somebody in there will probably need some more reflection as to which one of those brothers there is a better connection with.
Oh, that's a great one. I love that. I love the fact that you have done some work already and this made sense to you and what your image would be. And because everybody's going to have something very different and very unique to them. Yeah, that's great. That is great.
And I drew what is essentially the Mirror of Erised, and not for like deepest desire reasons. I was kind of trying to stay within the Harry Potter thing too, honestly, but it did represent a lot of because I've been in some sort of like therapy-ish thing since I was like 10 maybe, because it's always been important to mom and dad that it was a thing, right? So I also know where a lot of my demons lie and a lot of my stuff is. So I just like, whenever I find something that's like scary or something that I don't like, I always give it some stupid, super common name that takes away its power. So I just named the mirror Leslie.
Oh, that's perfect. I love that. I love that. It's great that you are, that mental health is a regular part of your upbringing. I love that aspect. Very much missed in a lot of communication with youth, for sure. And Michelle, is there anything that's come up for you that I know you're catching up a little bit.
Yeah, no, for me, it's more about, I think my fears is like, I kind of almost drew like, it's like basically a blob, like, because for me, it's about the fears with my families, just like my own family. And I think it's coming from the place that I also work in my profession. I see all the avenues that could happen. And so even because I have teenagers at my house, 3 of them, And so even when they have little issues, I can see, well, I feel like I can see where it could happen, like could go. So those fears, sometimes I have to try really hard not to put those ideas of what could happen onto them.
Projection,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's my biggest thing, because just because it's happened to people I know doesn't mean it will happen to my own circle. And we have a pretty good, we call it our clan. We have a pretty good clan of people that care about us, and not just direct family, but kind of links of the other families that we've all kind of grown together, and our kids have been small together. And so we have that connection, like those people. So I always, I guess, find comfort in the fact that we have that connection when a lot of my families that I work with don't.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. Thank you so much.
No
E-
problem.
Excellent. So we got the name because I covered that. Well, and so when we're doing our storyboard, we've created our villain because every story has to have a villain. And now we get to work on our hero or heroine. And so if you were to think of your hero or heroine, what do they look like and how do they stand? What posture do they take on? Do they have superhero powers, and what is their behavior or demeanor? So think about those things that you have, that your heroine or hero has. Um, and then I want you to imagine yourself taking a step into their shoes. If you're stepping into their shoes, how does it change your physical being? Do you change your posture? Do you stand taller? Do your shoulders go back and down? Does your head shift up, down, to the side? Does your heroine or hero have a pose, a power pose that they use? Like if you were talking about a superhero, maybe you're above the head. Yeah, you're strong. Like what does that feel like if you're in that pose? Maybe you've got your wand and your wand is set high, right? And you're holding your wand, you're posed and ready to go. So imagine how that feels for you. And then I want you to draw yourself as the superhero. So McGonagall is my heroine. I've taken her persona and I've taken it one step beyond drawing because I can't draw. And I've done a little photo shoot in my backyard. And I'm grateful for my neighbors who have a playhouse that looks like a castle. And so what would it look like if you were to draw your heroine and put your face into that space? And again, if you're not great at drawing, feel free to do the stick figure and write the words around your stick figure that would describe what you would look like, how you would stand, what you'd be wearing, all of those details. And then you can always go back to the internet and grab some screenshots and, you know, clip art, anything like that. And then you can paste it in. And these images can change over time. You can actually have many storyboards. So if your Boggart decides it's going to mutate, or you find a new element to your Boggart might have a new image, a new name. The same with your hero or your heroine. You might enhance that image. Something else came up and you're like, oh no, that's the person I want. I have some girls that I work with and they're going, Camilla Harris now resonates with me. It might have been Michelle Obama before, but Camilla Harris has taken her place, or some combination of those people. Draw it out. Make yourself the hero in the story. What does that look like for you?
Same one. Okay.
The next page in your book or your next line in your story is going to be when we have our hero and our Boggart interact. And in that interaction, there has to be two things that happen. First of all, we need to acknowledge the Boggart. We need to tell the Boggart, I see you and I recognize you. I know what you are. And thank them. We thank them because they're there to protect us. Remember, they don't know the difference between the real danger and perceived danger. And we need to say, thank you. So what does it look like if you're doing that interaction? Are you like curtsying to your Boggart? Are you bowing? Are you high-fiving, fist bumping? For me, my image was more about, I see you and I've got this. I see what you're up to. I see where you're going, but thank you very much. I can handle this. So what does that image look like when we take the time to draw that out? Is there anything that came up for anybody on that?
So I had written Professor McGonagall down as well before you said it. So
All good.
so I'm not copying. We're just on the same wavelength. For me to acknowledge my podcast or my Boggart, I need to sit beside it and take it in and just almost that idea of sitting alone in the dark with you for a moment and knowing that we're okay and that we're separate but together.
Yes, yes, that's beautiful. Love that.
Your Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Yeah.
Lauren?
I drew Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars, and I drew the younger version because I first of all like the prequel movies more than I like the original trilogy for some reason. I know that's super unpopular as an opinion, but I like Obi-Wan Kenobi a lot because he does a lot of keeping Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker in check, and he does a lot of when is it appropriate to fight and when is it time to be diplomatic, and he represents a lot of what is still good about the Jedi Order instead of what is hypocritical and what is destroying them from the inside. And I think that comes a lot from his own internal struggles and his own awareness of himself and those around him.
Beautiful. I love that, Torrin. Thank you. That's awesome.
I actually wrote down with the Harry Potter, Luna Lovegood. I always love Luna.
I do too.
I feel like she's that gentle person that just sees things for kind of the way they are. And she thinks it's just real, like example, seeing the death horses because she's seen death. And Harry didn't know that no one else could see that. And thus it was that was the reason why. So I really like that, especially with my Boggart being their, I guess their villain power is darkness and not people not sharing how they feel and being so scared of what could happen. Like that's his power, right? Just to keep you quiet and locked in and feel like you're alone. And so with Luna, how she kind of shares that little bit of light, and just because her story might have a little bit of the same of yours doesn't mean it's the same for everybody. So you can just kind of pick that little piece of light and connect to those people around you. So I kind of put like almost like from my wand was the shine of the light that through other people around you, you can make that light bigger and it kind of spreads to everybody.
Oh, I love that. I
It's
love
beautiful.
Yeah, and Luna Lovegood, she has what I coach around is called energy level 7, and it's a connection to universal energy, but she's so connected to universal energy, she's disconnected from the people who are right in front of her.
Mhm.
So it's a really neat place to work from. Yeah,
Yeah.
really cool. The next step you need to do is have your weapon ready, know what your weapon is, because every villain has a weakness. Get your weapon ready, and then stand in your advance and strike pose. What does that look like? How does it feel? And as you get ready to do that, you're going to cast your spell. Ridiculous, ridiculous. And what is the most ridiculous form of your Boggart? From the Harry Potter series, we have Neville with Snape, and Snape is wearing his grandmother's clothing. We have Ron with the spider, and he's got roller skates and a tutu on, like all over the floor, and everybody's laughing. And it's important that everybody's laughing. But what's more important is that you need to laugh. So whatever form you make your Boggart, the most ridiculous form of your Boggart, make sure it's something that makes you laugh. So this image here is my Boggart in its most ridiculous form. I want you to draw that out. Again, use your stick figures if you need to. So he is all of 2.5 inches tall. He's plastic, a little plastic figurine. And I think he's ridiculous in this form. No longer is he a scary 7-foot Viking with a snake and sharp shield. Even this little guy, his plastic, his sword comes out and it bends. So he can't hurt me. What is the most ridiculous form that your Boggart's going to take on? And I mentioned earlier about my friend who his Boggart was the measuring tape with his brother's names on it. In its most ridiculous form, it's this tiny little ruler, and the only name that's on it is his name. He no longer has to measure up to his brothers. He only has to measure up to himself. That's the only person that's in there. So yeah. So our Boggarts can take on some very different forms. Once your Boggart is in its most ridiculous form, we need one more step, and that is we need to turn our Boggart into an elf. So in the Harry Potter series, elves serve the magical community. That's their sole responsibility. And as much as Hermione wants to free the elves to do their own thing, they're not comfortable with that. That's not their role that they have lived into. And so we need to give our Boggart another task and turn him into the elf, make him serve us. So what can if you were to ask your Boggart to do something that would support you and your dreams and your goals and what you're trying to achieve, what would you ask your Boggart to do? What would it look like if they were supporting you? And for me, I needed a cheerleader. A cheerleader was super important. So I've taken my Boggart from being, you're such a loser, to being, no, I'm here to support you. And I'm going to take this little sword, this little plastic sword, and I'm going to nudge you. And I'm like, you can do it. Come on, I've got you. See, my little shield, it'll protect us. So think about your Boggart in its ridiculous form, supporting you. And my Boggart, I'm able to actually put him into my pocket when I'm feeling nervous or uncomfortable. I can feel his sword and go, oh, he's there to poke and prod me. He can help me. He can support me in me being the best that I can. And in doing this process, what we've done is we've created a villain. We've got you as the hero. We've given you an acknowledgement and thank you of the Boggart because they're there to protect us. They just don't know what they're up to and how they're scaring us. And then we're making them ridiculous to take away their power, to give them something that will make us laugh and give us joy. And then we're going to ask them to help us out. So if you're going to be present, if you're going to be that voice that's nattering at me, I need you to help me out in a different way. You're just a silly little Boggart doing silly things. So now help me out. Take me to the next step. What does it look like? How does it feel?
So my tombstone needs to be something ridiculous that I can't draw right now. um, but it needs to, the elf portion of it is essentially a neon sign that says that like we're here and here to help, and you know the doors are open, that kind of to attract people in.
That's great. I love that. I love that. And I mean, maybe like you can play with what that, the tombstone might look like. What does it look like in its most ridiculous form? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I turned my mirror first into like one of those funhouse mirrors, and I put eyes on top of it and gave it little squiggly arms just to make it as like purely ridiculous and as well. I mean, I'm already warping your perception, so why don't I do it in the most obvious way, sort of thing?
It's like this warping thing going.
Yeah. One of those where it like makes you like taller, and then it like in the middle you're just like squiggly and stuff. Yeah. And
I
then
love that.
and then in its helpful form, I made it this little like the mirror on the wall from Snow White and stuff like that,
Oh,
because it's like something that you can talk to and just sort of counsel, and just having something that's always there to talk to, sort of thing.
that's beautiful. Thank you, Torin. That's awesome. I love that.
My little blob now has like at the airport, those two little lights that they shine the light to which way kind of thing. He's now like instead of closed eyes and all dark, he's kind of open eyes and these big like lights, and it's kind of like he can show that there is a way to go, right? So that's kind of where he's kind of morphed from his dark black, no one can see through him. He's now open and light and trying to show you that there is still a way, even if there's the darkness out here.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That is like, I just love that expression of that. And really, what we've just done is we've done this really simple little storybook, and you can go back to it, repeat it over and over again if it morphs or add more detail. It's just a rough draft of the storybook. But once you get a handle on that Boggart, that fear, you get to be in control of what's happening. You get to be the one who rules where you're going, what you're doing, and how you're doing it. And I love this exercise just because it can be so empowering when you practice it. And every time that Boggart start like yattering at you, go, oh, I'm gonna cast that spell. Ridiculous, I gotcha. So really, this is all that I have for my presentation today. If you like this, if you found it of interest, you can certainly follow me on Facebook and Instagram at 9 3/4 Coaching, and it's all spelled out like that. Every Wednesday, I do a live video where I've taken a chapter from the Harry Potter series, picked out a coachable moment, explained what that is, how it might apply to your life, how you can use it in your life, just to give you some tips to get through the rest of the week. I also have my website, 9 3/4 coaching.com. Certainly welcome to check me out there. I love doing presentations, but I also do one-on-one coaching will tailor as need be for maybe somebody who's not in the demographic that I typically work with. But I love doing the Harry Potter thing. There's so much content in the Harry Potter process. And because of that, I'm actually in the process of editing a book that is all coachable moments from Harry Potter. And so I coach you from one point to the end using all Harry Potter references, and cross my fingers that'll be out later this year. So yeah, thank you.
That's really cool, Adette. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. And yeah, so you guys are welcome. I don't know if we have more on the Facebook page or anything that links us back. I'm not certain.
I
But
think Connie said it was a wrap after this, and that kind of thing, but don't quote me on that. So
okay.
yeah, but
Okay.
it was great, Adette.
Yep.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? If you want, because this one is one that I've been working with my girls with a lot. There's that anxiety technique that are you interested in learning it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so there's this tapping technique. So if you Google tapping, you're going to come up with a cognitive behavioral one where they're tapping different parts of the face and the body. And I don't do that type of tapping. So if you feel stress and anxiety coming up, find where your collarbone is across the front, and there's two little bumps where it comes together in the center, and then a kind of a dip and a hollow. Place your fingers right below on the solid material there, the chest material, and imagine that that's a 12 on a clock, and an inch or two below is a 6. And then I want you to tap in a counterclockwise way. So 12, 11, 10, 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just continue tapping in a circle. Now, I didn't think that this would work. My naturopath taught it to me. And I think, well, how crazy is this? As I'm just tapping on my chest. But I had a really stressful day. And I was coming home from work. I got stuck in traffic. And then I remembered this technique. But instead of tapping really gentle, I was so stressed out. I was like pounding my chest. And a very short time, what I discovered was that my tapping got softer and gentler. My thoughts became more rational. My breathing and my heart rate settled down, and my stomach wasn't in knots anymore. And I was like, whoa, no tapping way. This actually works. So it's really a kind of cool technique. The alternate is to do the inside of your wrist, and you can do one at a time or both at the same time. So for Torrent, I want to give you a caveat on this one. If you are using it in an exam, please talk to your teacher before you use it, because I've had some students come back to me and tell me that their teachers thought that they were doing Morse code and cheating in their test. This guy's crazy, but I just don't want him to get into trouble when he doesn't need to be. So just talk to your teacher, tell them what you're doing is you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is really slow. Like when we get into fear, flight, and fight reaction, it comes on really quick, like just the snap of a finger, it's there. But our parasympathetic nervous system kind of dawdles. It takes its time. And this just speeds it up and says, hey, I need you to wake up and I need you to take action and be here for me to support me. So super really key one, but I found it super effective. And so I like to tag it on if I can, if there's time. Yeah.
There is also a practice that you might want to look at called Jin Shinjitsu, which a friend of mine teaches it and is a facilitator and that kind of stuff. There's lots of stuff that you can do as self-help things, just with finger holds and that kind of thing. So it may be worth looking at, just for some extra techniques and that kind of stuff.
I love all these sorts of things. I just like, oh, I got to try this one. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Audrey. Appreciate it. Yeah. And that's everything we have for today. I wish you guys all the best. I hope that you had some enlightenment or some connection or community, something that you got out of this week or out of this day. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you
It
so
was
much.
awesome. Perfect. Adette, have a great afternoon.
You too. Take care.